out working on the Velocette again, still waiting for parts for the Riley. So I've been cleaning up the rear bevel drive, and I thought I'd open it up to have a look inside and check the main output shaft oil seal, which is in here. Apparently they're quite prone to leaking, and if they leak you get oil on your rear brakes. So the good thing is to take this apart is pretty easy, to get inside it at least. The crown wheel, it's like the tiniest crown wheel I've ever seen. That all comes off as an assembly on the cover, so you can just undo the bolts around the outside and pull that out. And it looks like this oil seal has been done. So inside here there's a roller bearing with loose rollers. You can see them all here. They all just completely fall out when you open this up, but in this case they were when you reassemble this, what you do is you put grease around there so the pins stick in, and then you can push this back in through that seal and have the rollers contained. And when I took this apart, I didn't bother draining the oil out of it. I'd forgotten to do that, but it was very clean oil. It looks like that oil seal has been replaced because it's new and it's soft. It's not an old style one. And the bearings were still packed in white grease, so I suspect this has been done and then never actually run. It was pretty grubby inside still, even though it was all clean oil. So I've given it a really good clean out. It still needs a bit more of a clean out. I was very careful not to ruin the gasket, and I can just reuse this. I'll reassemble it. That seal is good. I'm sure that's a new seal because it's very soft. Doesn't look like there's any damage on it. I'll go over it with a magnifying glass just to make sure. And on the outside here there's kind of a ring, a channel. You can see there's a little drain hole. That was blocked up, so I've unblocked that. The idea of that is any oil that does make it past the seal gets caught there and just drains back into the bevel drive. I still need to give it a bit of a clean on the outside. I've got all the old paint off that just effectively fell off as soon as it went anywhere near paint stripper. So I'll just give it I'll just try and get it a bit cleaner, a bit more. I'm not going to polish it, but I'll get it a bit tidier. There's a little bit of wear on the teeth. So these are the teeth. Basically these engage. Have a look. This is the front wheel. This is the rear wheel. The good thing is the tires are holding air, so they haven't gone flat. I didn't pinch a tube or damage them or anything, so that's good. But this is the rear drive, so this goes in here. A little bit of play there. I don't know how much play is too much. I mean, that does seem a bit wobbly, but there isn't really anything I can do about that, so it'll just have to go back together as best I can. You put a thin smear of grease on those teeth and reassemble it. So that's all good. I will basically reassemble this with all the little rollers. I put a smear of grease on the gasket and put it all back together. Just about to reassemble this. I've held the rollers in place with I'm using Penrite high temperature wheel bearing grease. I smeared some around the oil seal as well, and I'll smear some around the flange, the mounting surfaces. There's 23 rollers. I had to go check that because when you assemble it, it looks like there could be one missing. You end up with a little bit of a gap, but 23 is the correct number. I guess it pays to count them just to make sure. I did, and was one short and found it was sitting in the bottom of my container full of muck. So I'm going to put this back together, and I've just noticed my gasket is coming off a little bit, so Instead of grease, I may spray that with some sort of gasket spray stuff. I've got copper gasket stuff, and I think I've got Hylamar. That's the stuff. That's what I'll use on that. I'll just give it a smear of Hylamar rather than the grease. That should work a lot better. I've gone a step further with this bevel drive rear axle setup, and I've taken off the actual shaft. This is the propeller shaft that goes through with the little muff coupling. Oh, just came off. And probably would have been easier for me to do this up front before I cleaned up all of this, but that's okay. I hadn't read the right page in the service manual, but now with that apart, I think I'm just going to clean all the old grease out basically and put it back together with new grease. I think this is all fine. There'll be wear there, of course, because it's not new, but it didn't seem to be excessive. So yeah, I'll give it a good degrease and put it back together. I think this might be a good example of sometimes it's better not to take things apart and see what's wrong. As I mentioned, I took off the swing arm, I guess it's called, and to have a look at the pinion shaft and the muff coupling. It goes on the prop shaft. That's this piece here. Interestingly, the Riley has a similar setup where it's got a muff coupling down the end of the torque tube to join the propeller shaft up to the pinion. It's almost exactly the same, where it's got the coupling down this end, but there is a ton of wear. Not sure if it'll focus on that, on those teeth. Actually, the easiest way to show it is like this. So that's a lot of wear. I haven't got the coupling all the way off the shaft yet. I think there's a bit of rust or something on there. I think that'll just pull off. Now this gets interesting. So looking in the club notes and on the forum, it does mention that I think it's the Mark 1s and the early Mark 2s, the muff coupling is a sliding fit on there. But on the later ones, it's meant to be a very tight push fit. Sort of, you need a press to get it in place. This doesn't seem like it would have been pressed on. So, unless it's kind of slipped down and come loose, because it doesn't look like it'll go down any further than that. So maybe that's where the press fit starts. So I don't know if this is an earlier one or a later one. So I don't know if this should be a sliding fit or a push fit. That's my first problem. Looking in the service manuals and the books, when it is a push fit, you're supposed to take all of this apart, take the pinion gear out, set it up on the lathe between centers and check for run out in the middle here. And I think you're supposed to get 3 thou or get it to 3 thou. I'm not sure I'm able to do that. You need a special tool to get all of this undone, of course. And even then, with the wear here, I don't know how you would fix that. Apparently one of the fixes is to use Loctite 660, which I guess you use to fit this to there. Set it all up on the centers and let it cure. Not sure how that would work. So I'm not sure what the best thing to do here is. I'll post it on the forum and see what people think there. It may just be the best thing to do is put some grease on there, put it back together and not worry about it. It's never going to be a perfect bike or a very high mileage bike at all. If I get it finished and I'm able to ride it and I find I really do want to ride it more, then I can look at it again. And I do actually have another one of these units, although it looks in worse condition, but I haven't stripped it down to have a look inside it. So I think that's what I may end up doing for now, is just reassemble it. I don't know if I should use the Loctite in there on this one or not, to kind of hold that in place. Yeah, it's tricky. These are the sort of cans of worms you open up when you strip things down and actually start taking a closer look at them. And it would be nice to get everything back to absolutely perfect factory new, but that's just not possible with a lot of old stuff. So you kind of have to think, well, it was probably running with all this wear in it, and do you just put it back together and not worry? So, don't know. It's an interesting one, but yeah, that's not good, I'm assuming. You can get new crown wheel and pinions, I think, from the spares, but again, that's then, now I've got the expense of buying those and shipping them over, and then you still have to set all this up in the lathe and get the run out right and that kind of thing, I think. So I'm hoping it's one where I can just reassemble it and ignore it. This is my, I guess you could say, spare unit. Doesn't look like it's in very good condition, and I just realized it's completely different. This is all steel, whereas this is all aluminium. So I don't know if that means this is an earlier one or a later one. Somebody's obviously been in here before, so there's bolts missing. The universal joints up this end, and yeah, there's wear and all of that as well. So there's no end-to-end motion in this one. Given this is different, it's probably not even worth me taking apart, because I'm not sure if the parts are even compatible. Yeah, like I say, I suspect it's going to be a put it back together and pretend we didn't see it job. Taken apart the other drive, or at least got the swing arm off it. I think the steel ones are earlier ones and these alloy ones came later. Seems to be the way it works. This also has wear on the pinion, and you can see it probably. Quite a lot of wear on the pinion, and on the muff coupling side it's even worse. I don't know if we'll be able to see it. There aren't even really any splines left. There's little ridges about a 1/16 of an inch wide, little sharp pointy ridges, and that's all that's left of the muff coupling on that end. So this one is far better than the other one. It turns out that from the spares you can get the new crown wheel and pinions. They're very reasonably priced. As far as I can tell, they're new old stock, still in their protective coating, wax coating. They're only £50 for the set. You can also get new drive shaft and muff couplings. I think that was £75. But even with those, then I'd have to get them shipped here, and that's something I need to figure out with the club. They have a 2 kg limit on the shipping, otherwise it gets a bit complicated, I think. So what I'm looking at doing is one big order at some point, and I'll just have to take the hit on the shipping. Hopefully they'll be fine to do that, but because it's such a hassle for them, I only want to do that once if I can avoid it, and then any other orders can just be little bits and pieces, so it's under their 2 kg limit. But yeah, it's interesting how much wear there is on these. I'm not sure if these are interchangeable. They look very similar. Yeah, it's kind of annoying that the wear happens here, because as far as I can tell, the actual crown wheel and pinion gears themselves are fine. on both of these. I'd have to open this one up to really know, but yeah. So like I say, I think for now I'll reassemble it how it is. Also, when you look at things like this, you have to consider what'll happen if I don't fix it, or it's not perfect. And I think in this case, what you would see is the symptom is the bike would snatch because there's play between the engine and the rear wheels, so it would be quite jerky. How bad that would be, I've got no idea. It'd be interesting to see, but I think that's what I can do. All I can do is put it back together and see how bad it is and see if it's a problem. Like I say, this bike, I don't have a bike license. Maybe I would want to get one, but I'm not really that keen to ride on the road, to be honest. So chances are all I'm ever going to do is putter around the garden, just to do it. I work from home most of the time. When I'm in the city, there's no way I'd be riding it into the city. So yeah, it's these projects always end up being more complicated than you first think, but that's okay. That's a project. You kind of expect that. So yeah, I wonder. There's a lot of wear there. I'm just trying to see how much wear there is. So there's definitely not as much. Oh, that little click is horrible. That's it, skipping over the spline. Not fully over, it's just at the end when it's pushed home, I think. But, oh well, another problem to solve, or ignore. So for now I've just reassembled it how it was. I did put some grease on the splines. I'm not a complete animal, but for now I'm just going to put this aside until I can fix it properly, I guess. Like I say, the parts are really pretty cheap. It's just the ordering them and getting them here is going to be a bit complicated. I've been reading up a bit more about this. There is a special tool you can use to undo the pinion nut. Apparently it's really tight because these were put in with heat, so I think you have to heat this up in order to get that undone. And then I would need to mount that whole thing, the whole assembly would have to go in the lathe so you can measure the run out. I don't quite understand how you fix it if there is run out. I need to read the articles again. But you mount it between centers, which means I'd actually have to get I would need the right center to go in the taper on my lathe here. I don't think I've got one. I've got one for this end, but not that end. Yeah, it doesn't really say how you get that run out down if there is run out. So I need to look into that a bit more. But this is what goes on the other end of the prop shaft. So this is the universal joint. This seems good. So there's no play in the splines on this one. There's no play on the splines on this end of things. And there is a spring which goes on the end there. And then this goes in there like that. I guess the run out in there would mean the U-joint would wear out faster. I'm guessing. I guess that's why you don't want run out there, because it'll make this run off center. And then of course that's not going to be good going into the gearbox output. It'll make everything wobbly, it'll wear out the seals and the bearings and all sorts of things. That way around. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's no bearings or anything at this end to hold the end of that shaft. so I guess that's why the run out has to be so low. But, oh well, it's another piece mostly cleaned up for now, and I'll put it aside and keep going on with the body and other bits and pieces. Maybe I'll switch to doing some welding now and try and start fixing some of this. The rest of the mechanicals, I'm going to need to do a test assembly. I don't have enough good parts to throw together even a badly running engine. The big ends here do have play in them, so really that needs to be fixed. Cylinder barrels are stuffed because they're scored where it looks like someone ran without clips on the end of the gudgeon pins, so the ends of the pins have scraped the bores. I've got two different sized heads for the different size combustion chambers. I think this would actually work, but obviously that's not ideal. I'm missing half the ignition. The gearbox seemed fine when I took that apart. All the bearings and things in there are fine. But I would replace all the oil seals just because I'm in there. I need to reassemble it enough to check all these sort of bearing clearances. I can't remember if I did or not when I took it apart. I think they were pretty good. I'm trying to remember if I did that. But that's okay, I'll reassemble it. I should actually repack these wheel bearings and I can put those back in the wheels at least. Yeah, I just want to reorganize the parts. Everything's taking up so much room. I don't know why I ended up working on my most rickety, it's not even a bench, it's a paint stand with a piece of plasterboard over the top, which is broken. So I was probably lucky the whole thing didn't collapse while I was doing all of this. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave this bevel drive at the moment. I think that's where I'm going to leave things on the Velocette for now. The rear axle, I've done all I can on that. I did order a Morse Taper 3 center to go in my lathe, so when it becomes time to fix that properly, I should be able to set that up and do that on the lathe. And the only other thing is my new MIG welding tips arrived, so I was able to weld up the little spot at the back there, and I'll grind that down so it's flat. And then I need to look at repairing all of this. That will be the next thing. And I also want to strip down the front forks and shocks and the rear. That's these. They're full of grease. I need more degreaser. It'd be really handy if there was some kind of liquid paint stripper where I could just fill a bucket with some sort of paint stripper and put these parts in and have the paint fall off. Otherwise I have to buy the gel type stuff and sort of brush it on and then rub it off. It's very annoying. Yeah, that's where we'll leave it for now. Today I've done a little bit more work on the Velocette body. I've welded up the holes and the cracks around the seat mounting point. It's not perfect, it's getting better, but at least there's no holes or cracks there now. Done a little bit more random cleanup in various places. No, not there. I think it was the other side. Just trying to tidy up some of this. This piece here, it's a bit tricky to know what shape it is because it's flat. So there is a little bit of oil canning here. But I can't get this up completely because it's being pulled down by the battery box. You may just be able to see there's a curve to that. So this edge is pulled down. I think once that seat mount is bolted to there, and I'm going to put a stiffening plate on the inside as well. That will get this to the shape it needs to be. It's very tricky when all these panels, when there's just so much flatness to it. Even having a little bit of crown makes it easier for things to hold their shape, but without it, it kind of flops around a bit. I don't think it's going to matter too much. I also fixed up that little corner, just sort of went over it with the MIG and built up the edge and then filed it all back, sanded it back. So that's coming along nicely. Cleaned up a few other little bits and pieces, like the springs for the seat. I just sort of pick random little bits and pieces and then clean them up as best I can. I did fit the wheel bearings. I've painted up the little covers as well. I'm not sure if these are supposed to be a really tight fit on there or not, because these ones aren't. So I'm assuming those are meant to be sort of a tight push fit. So I may need to look at what happens there, or do they just sit loose and then when the wheel is mounted they're fine. I'm not quite sure what the story is there, but I've cleaned them up anyway, and that's really it at the moment. So I think that's all the welding I need to do on this, apart from whatever I decide to do here. And it may just be easier to leave that as a bolt-on piece since the holes are already there. There's the little panel. It annoys me that they're a little bit crooked and off center, but I've got plenty of this kind of screw, for example. If I bolt this on, and then just bolt them on semi-permanently and paint over the top, and they'll barely be noticeable. Or else it's a matter of welding this up and just plug welding this back in place as it was originally, sort of spot welded. So probably end up doing that, I think. Just might be nicer. And then the whole thing still needs a lot of grinding and sanding and cleaning up to try and get it smooth.